The November 14th Public Works Board meeting. Misty, could you take the roll call, please?
Ms. Schmidt? Here. Mr. Temperley?
Here.
Mr. Pickard?
Here.
Mr. Reich?
Here.
Ms. Wolf? Here. And Mr. Lair previously informed staff that he'd be unavailable this evening.
All right. Item 3, correction and approve of the minutes of September 12th, 2017. 3 of us from that meeting are here, so we've been informed we have a quorum to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Take the roll call vote on this one.
Mr. Temperley?
Aye.
Mr. Pickard?
Aye.
Mr. Reich?
Aye.
Ms.
You're
Wolf?
supposed to abstain because you
Oh.
weren't here.
Abstain.
Ms. Wolf?
Abstain.
Ms. Schmidt? Aye. Motion passed 3-0.
Item 4, questions and public comment. There's nobody here. Item 5, discussion on TID utility street projects, American Way. I think Mark and I requested this because we heard of it, but it wasn't officially in the Public Works Board list of projects at their last meeting.
No. In fact, it was a TID proposed project that was proposed to the council through the budget to say, do you want to do this?
Right.
And so that was the discussion. They did come out and say they wanted to move forward with the project. So we had Strand put together some numbers for you, and they're in the packet. They show the first phase, which is from Industrial Drive to Brookstone Drive along the south end of Wallace Park. There are a couple items that drive that. First, we get a lot of complaints about semi trucks that get stuck on the east side and can't get over to the west side. And traveling back and forth up and down Brookstone can be difficult for those trucks. The second one is there are some changes going on with Campus Field. And so they want to move baseball off of there and move all the baseball out to Wallace Park. So having more parking spaces available and having access to the south side of the street may have some advantages. So this project has been proposed to move forward. Half of it is TID, half of it is special assessment.
So there's 2 segments, one for the park, and then it's part of the TID district, correct?
Yes, part of it is.
Yeah. And the other part is in undeveloped land further to the east.
That's
To
correct.
Harvey Road, and that's where you're gonna special assess the property
Yes,
owner, hoping he'll,
that's why it was in the special
Build houses.
assessment portion.
right.
But it wasn't proposed for this year because there's a lot of negotiation that has to go on through a special assessment process on an individual property owner.
Okay,
So there were a couple reasons for that. One was the desire to have a second access out along that edge. And then the next one was some economic development opportunities. I think we're down to 5 lots in the city. And so our inventory is up, and so we wanted to encourage someone to take the opportunity to start developing.
I mean 5 industrial lots or
No,
residential?
5 residential lots.
Right.
Where are those? Pinnacle Drive.
So the question going forward, should every utility project in a TID come to this board for a recommendation? I think I will go to the next council meeting and ask them to follow that policy.
It's kind of a chicken or an egg here. I have to
Yeah.
ask them, do they want to do it before I bring it to the Public Works Board and say, okay, this is what we're looking at. And then
Right.
they can ask you for a recommendation, which I don't think it should go the other way around where I have to develop all this information. You guys go through the process and then it goes to council. So
But that's how most things do, though. I mean, the
a
library
lot
board-
of places it goes to the council and the council sends it back to the committees.
Right.
If it's developer driven though, it typically comes from there
To the
Plan
Public Works
Commission
Board.
and we're-
That's correct.
Yeah. So it's when it's city driven that it's the other way.
Yes, if we're proposing it, then we have to ask the city council, is this something you're willing to take on? Because
Right.
then we have certain issues we have to work through first. If it's a developer proposed project, that always comes to the Public Works Board first. But that's because they have the right to request that.
Well, and it's usually part of a plating process. They have to have that approval before the plat can go forward. Does the TIF district itself, the project plan, need to be amended at all to accommodate
No,
this?
this was included in the last amendment.
Okay.
It was some of the discussion when we did the last amendment already at that point in time.
What's the action we're looking at tonight?
There's no action.
Not at this point in time.
Yeah.
The street already it had sewer constructed when Brookstone went in. 2 years ago, we put in the water main because DNR had been pressuring us for about 15 years to put the water main in. And when we did that, we constructed the road base to put in a road. So the overall process here is pretty minimal. Now so we'll have curb and gutter and asphalt and some stormwater and the base course for this street. So it's pretty minimal as far as a construction project. It's a little bit more complicated in that part of the south end would be special assessed, or the south half would be special assessed to the property owner on the south side. The city's portion would be paid for by TID because it's part of the TID project. So I guess we're moving forward with approaching the developer and starting to lay out the process, the landowner, and starting to lay out the process for what we are looking at and hoping to take care of in the next 12 months. At that point in time, we would probably come forward with like we do with all our public construction projects, we'd have a set of plans developed, you guys would get them, and then we'd put it in a construction bid. And then you guys, depending on the process, either you or the council would be able to award the bids.
Anybody have any other questions? Is that good enough information for you, Mark? I think this is what we wanted. It wasn't part of the official Public Works Board plan, and we just heard it mentioned, and we saw it in your city memo, so.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to hide anything. It was in multiple
Oh, yeah,
budgets, and it was in my memos and stuff. It was, I guess I felt the process is because we're proposing it, we needed city council approval to move forward with any of the development of the project. If it were a developer-driven one, it's totally different.
All right.
Will this
At
be,
least you know we read your memos.
is this going to be going to the plan commission too, or is it kind of not necessary?
Well, I included that in the packet is that this is already platted.
Yeah, right,
It's already
okay.
zoned.
And so, it isn't zoned. It would
Oh,
have
it's
to be
not.
zoned.
Oh,
It's zoned, it's a PDD that's zoned RD1 until such time as the plat is approved, or the final plat is approved. And so I think the zoning would have to still go to Plan Commission, but I think when we did the original plat, the preliminary plat, and we platted this, there was a recommendation for R2, but we don't have R2 zoning anymore. So it would have to go to some other similar type of zoning that we'd have to run through the process. But to put the street in doesn't really require that. It's more along the lines of what kind of, if there's going to be some type of development there along that street and what they're looking for. I've asked to meet with several builders in the area and see what they think. Because there's some other issues here besides, down on the south end of the park, it's pretty much a simple street build, very simple, because everything else is prepared. Up on the east end, it's a little bit more complicated, because if you remember that there's a lot of, there's a rock shelf on the far east end and make some of the infrastructure and the house building a little bit more complicated. And so it would be, I want to make sure that I'm looking at this properly before I jump off the end. That's why the east end is a much different project than the west end.
Just one additional comment about this is not not so much for the Public Works Board, but in general for the public. You know, if it's not been talked about in meetings very much, then the public doesn't have as much of a visibility on it, so then it's like, oh my gosh, this is happening all rather suddenly, and they don't, you know, the public doesn't have much of a chance to make comments hasn't had a chance to really make comments about this as far as I can see.
No, it was actually platted, the street was platted.
Right, I understand about
Yeah.
that, but the project moving forward
Right, so.
and how it's moving forward, that's the discussion that,
What I looked at was all the conceptual basis for the road and all the construction and the development process has already been vetted substantially. The actual construction of the road is a little bit different now. If the developer came in with it already being platted, he'd submit plans and you guys would look at the plans, it would go relatively fast. Because we're doing this a little bit backwards, it gets a lot more, it should get a lot more public vetting before it goes forward. I'm not going to deny that, but we were in that beginning phases of it, so it's hard to, I don't want the council to find out about it at a Public Works Board meeting.
yeah. I'm not saying it should go to the Public Works Board meeting or the Plan Commission first. I'm just saying that it seems like it's like, boom, here it is. It's and not just as anybody in the community, not just as a Public Works Board member.
Right. I have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Right.
You have to realize I get a little jaded too. I mean, I spent 6 years doing the Plan Commission code rewrite, and when we brought it forward, it was like, you guys never talked about this.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. What, 7 years it was before it came as an ordinance?
Yeah, so much right.
Right.
Anyways, I understand, but this is really early yet. I mean, I have several other processes I have to go through even before it'll come back to you, but I have to start somewhere. Todd, can we jump to my other portion?
What's that?
East Lake Park Place.
You want to go there first?
Yeah, I'm going to go to the town board meeting tonight.
Oh, okay.
Because they're discussing Creekwood Farms expansion.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, so I want to make sure that I have an opportunity to watch that.
What number is that on?
7D?
It's way down there.
All right, let's just do that first. See if we can go
Yeah,
to
it's D.
D. All right, we'll do 7D first, and then we'll go back to the regular schedule.
It's the only other one that had an attachment.
Ah, yes.
Oh, yeah, there is one.
Yeah, both my items had attachments.
Yeah.
Nobody else did.
Pat him on the back.
We're too busy.
I guess you'd look, if you've been down there, the street is complete. It rides pretty well. It looks pretty good.
For now, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, when they paved that, that's as dry as it's been in 2 years. I was pretty pleased. In fact, there was a little bit of a bonus thrown on top if they got it paved that Friday, because we were worried about it raining again. And they had passed all the inspections and the proof rolls, and it was as hard as a bone and blowing dust, so we wanted them out there paving it. As with all projects, there were a number of change orders. We had, last fall, we had them add a drain tile under the south side curb. There were additional water valves put in, some tree takedowns that were added. modifications to some of the sidewalk and the ditches and the stormwater pipe. We haven't special assessed the whole project yet that I know of. But overall, we came in lower than the second highest, the second lowest bid. So even though we paid a little bit more than we anticipated, we still were lower than the second lowest bid. So we did really well. We did not pay to have the street torn apart and rebuilt. We only paid for what we would have paid for during the original street construction. So if they had to dig down and add additional rock or put in additional base support, we paid for that. And we paid for, instead of 4 inches asphalt, we paid for 5. The original asphalt that failed, although it wasn't the asphalt company's fault that it failed, that was removed at the contractor's expense. And so they did all the work, prepared all the base again, did all the grading, got it all ready, and then we paid for the material that was installed. And that's all we paid for. So if anybody tells you we paid for the road twice, that is not true. We did make some adjustments. Like I said, we added the drain tile. And the 5 inches was, we were concerned about the structural base of the roadway. And so while they put in additional base, which we called, what, EOB? EBS. and had additional base put in a lot of areas. It rained so much again this summer, we were again concerned about the problem. In fact, in the fall it got really dry and we thought, great, it's going to go great. And the second they took the asphalt off, it started raining, and it rained for several days. In fact, I think it rained for 2 weeks straight. So we were again getting concerned. So one of the ways to make up for base is add asphalt. So 1 inch of asphalt is like 3 inches of base. So we compensated for any potential weak spot in that by adding that additional lift. So we did buy an extra inch asphalt, but I think we got a much better product in the long run. So I feel pretty good about the street construction.
Any questions or comments?
Is there, we've been doing streets, of course, for a long time, and this is the first time that I can recall where there was a major issue like this. Is there any plans on changing what we do, or are we going to stick with what is tried and true?
Well, for way back when Al Lou was here, the standard that we used has been relatively similar. We made a couple changes here and there based on the industrial park and Owen Street were 2 projects that come to mind that were a little bit more difficult than normal. And Owen Street is from O'Neill down to Memorial Park along the west edge of the old CPN building. And on the west side of it, now it's Rock Lake storage. There's a bunch of mini warehouses there, and then on the other side, it's that zero lot line development. And then in the industrial park, it was kind of similar, but what you had there was high water tables. But generally, historically, we have not had a lot of problem with road bases. Probably the other one that we will is Stony Road there by the wastewater treatment plant. That road floats. You should notice that, Mark. I mean, it's like every time it freezes, the whole road changes direction.
Altitude, not direction.
Yeah. And I think that some of the things that we probably did this year that we haven't done historically, we did more base testing, and we did more, instead of taking one gradient on the base material when they submitted their documents, and normally what we would do is we take shop drawings and they submit all their shop drawings way at the beginning of the project, and they would submit the material that they were going to use to build the base. And that would tell us what gradient it was, so it would tell us how much fines were in it or not, what size product was coming in. And this year we made them actually provide that gradient information just before they started delivering the material and when they changed material. So we became a little bit more cautious on the front end. Not really a change in the specs, but a change in the way we monitored what was coming in.
So what, do you have any ideas why the proof rolling didn't catch this?
The base course that was provided had a high level of fines that was approaching double the allowable limit. And what that does is it creates makes the base course act somewhat like clay. So when it's dry, it can be hard, but when it gets wet, it becomes more soft and pliable. Mm-hmm. And so depending on what the exact conditions are when you're proof rolling, it might not give under a truck if you're proof rolling when it's dry. And then other times, and this is kind of matches what we observed, is we had a number of times where we were proof rolling, and though, last time we proof rolled, a certain section looked good, and then you come back a week later to, kind of do another section, but then you run over that part, and now this is soft, and what's going, that was part of what was vexing about that project.
And proof rolling to a certain extent did catch it. We never technically approved that final. What they asked for was to pave over the base to see if it would dry out.
Right.
And we said, okay, they called it to heal. Mm-hmm. And we were like, yeah, sounds great to us. We need something to keep the water from, because it was raining all the time.
Yeah.
We needed something to keep that water out of the base, and we were hoping between the tile we added and the pavement, it would dry that base out and allow it to heal up, but it just never did.
And it was also in late September when they paved it last year, so we were kind of running out of time a little bit. The pavers start to get really busy, and
So was the base inconsistent over the project, or was it uniformly crappy?
it was generally the same material over the course of the,
Yeah, we had a report done by PSI, and I don't know if you noticed, they came in and did some drillings, and then they dug some holes, and then they dug some holes again, and it was pretty much uniformly across all those samples. It was bad.
They actually took 10 samples across the whole length of the project, and they were all pretty similar in terms of the gradation of the material.
So moving forward, will be a little bit, take the sample of the material later in the project?
Yeah, like either from the pile that's actually being put into trucks and delivered, or from a pile on site is what we've been allowing, I guess. As Steve described, oftentimes, they'll submit a shop drawing of the gradation in April, and, they're bringing base out in July, and you're kind of subject to, is that even really still the same material that they submitted? And, oftentimes our lot sizes, the amount of tons of base course that we're using, doesn't require much testing according to like WSDOT specifications, because it's pretty small compared to, the huge quantities they usually deal with. So we kind of added that more on-site sampling.
I do want to note, though, that for over 20 years, well, probably 25 years, that's the way we've been doing it.
Yeah.
And pretty much the same suppliers that whole time, and never had an issue. It was just, and again, this year we had the same suppliers and didn't have any issue. So I guess just a fluke.
And it could be, some area of their pit that they got into, I mean, who knows? It's not that the supplier's material is always bad, it just,
It's not like the change that you're doing is, I think, I look at it as a small change. It's, something a little bit extra to catch you in the future, but it's, like you said, it's not something that happens all the time, so you don't want to overreact either. So, good.
all I have.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll go back to the regular schedule. 6, 2017 construction updates on electric utility.
I guess that's me.
All right,
Actually, Dwayne and I think Brandon will jump in, we'll play a little tag team as we go through this whole thing, and our intention is, like I said, just to give you some updates. We didn't put together a lot of written material, we'll give you some of the, the basics where we are now, and then certainly respond to your questions. The other thing is that some of the, although we divided it up into electric, water, wastewater, a lot of the things overlap, so we may cover several different areas as we move through here. Just, I'll try not to jump around so much that you don't know what I'm talking about. That may happen, but I'll try not to do that. First of all, the AMI project, as we talked about, is underway. A lot of what we're doing right now is the what they call the back door stuff, getting all the computer software together, making sure that all of our records are going to transfer over when we do the
Paul,
AMI.
AMI?
I'm sorry, it's automated metering infrastructure,
Okay.
which are the newer meters that we can read remotely. The meters are also going to have the capability of, we can talk to them, we can disconnect them, we can reconnect them all remotely. So in the next 3 years or so, we should be able to have our entire system, water and electric and sewer, under this. So we'll be modern, we'll be more efficient, and we'll have more data to work with as we do our load planning and that sort of thing. Yeah, I'm sorry, I should have explained that. Where we are now then physically is we've got 2 antenna sites identified, and one of them will be the water tower, and then we've put a new pole up by the old water tower up there, so that's where we'll be putting the antennas that will collect all the information. And really basically right now we're just waiting for Census, who is the vendor we're working with, to get all of the like I say, the backdoor stuff ready to go, so that when we fire this thing up, we're confident it's going to work. We have been installing water meters that are capable of working with this system, simply because we're installing a lot of water meters to address our water loss. The electric meters are a little touchier because the electric meters are kind of the brains of this whole thing, and so we've got to wait until Census gets everything put together on those, because those are the meters themselves are the ones that gather the water meter information and actually send out the signal, so we want to make sure that's right. But we anticipate we should be installing meters in the first quarter of next year.
So installing a new electric meter will mean temporary disconnection of power from the residence or business or whatever, correct?
Correct. And kind of our plan right now is to do this in sections. So, maybe we'll pick several blocks. We'll send those folks a notice that within the next few days, you're going to have an instantaneous interruption. It's, basically long enough to pull one meter, put another one in. That will affect, I call them VCRs. I don't know if people have VCRs. It'll affect anything that needs that constant current. But we'll make sure people know we're going to be in their area, not just from that standpoint, but because there's going to be people wandering through the backyards and that sort of thing. So yeah, we'll make sure people understand what's going on.
I think my power's gone out 6 or 8 times this year, so that's nothing new.
Duly noted. We've had kind of a rough year in your area.
Nothing meant by that.
No, I not a problem. Okay.
A lot of new infrastructure down in that neighborhood too, right?
Yes. Well, in general, and I'll kind of talk about that in a little bit when we talk about South Madison Street, what's kind of driving some of those things. So that's AMI, unless you have some questions on that. The next one is new services, and what's meant by this is new electric services. We're not coming up with new services we're going to provide to people, but new electric services. And this is for the entire system, so it's not just in the city of Lake Mills, but we do have some rural areas. But I'll tell you what our numbers have been for the last 4 years, and if you think back to when Steve talked about we've only got 5 residential lots left in the city. So here are the breakdown of the services that we're installing. This year to date, we've installed 17. and pretty much the new service time is over. We don't do a lot of those later in the year. In 2016, we installed 32 new services. 2015, we installed 29, and in 2014, we installed 32. So you can see that that number is dropping dramatically. And again, that's part of that is because there's nowhere to build in the city right now. There's a new subdivision out in Shorewood Hills. We anticipate we'll be putting a lot more services in there. But as far as right in the city goes, that's...
What about Brewster Drive development?
Well, yeah, when that goes, yeah, those numbers will skyrocket.
Right. And is that residential and apartment, or just apartment?
In the new one, you mean?
Yeah, the Brewster.
It's both,
Yeah, okay.
but the first phases will be all multifamily, and then
Yeah.
the last phase will be single family.
Yeah. And by PSC rule, every one of those has to have its own meter. So yes, we will see in essence a lot of services that way. Moving on in South Madison Street. That was the final piece in basically getting the loop around the lake and getting our 24/9 or our 25,000 volt system in place so that we can serve the industrial park and almost everywhere except the older downtown part of the city. So in other words, we have access to 25,000 volts. The other system is 4160, 4,160 volts. That will remain in the downtown area. So Madison Street was the final key in getting that completed, and that is now finished. And the process we're in now, and it will require some more short outages here and there, is now we're beginning to switch load off of the old system onto the new system, onto the 25,000 volt system, and then we'll start retiring some of the older lines. And that takes time because we want to make darn sure when we switch a load over that we have caught every customer and, somebody's not hanging out there in no man's land. So that's the project or the process we're working through now. Also, we prefer to do it in the winter because our load is lower. And so we'll be doing that for the next few months, making all of our switching.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
South Madison Street, do you mean West Madison?
I'm sorry, not South Madison. I keep getting South
No.
Main and Madison mixed up. I apologize. Yeah, it should be Madison Street, not South Madison, thank you. But then that leads us nicely into South Main Street. And the electric portion of moving all of our facilities out of the way that's the biggest thing that's happening right now. That's what you're physically seeing out there. We are finishing the portion basically from the high school down to the end of the line, down Sandy Beach Road and that way. The contractor's intention right now is to get all of the conduit in the ground before the ground freezes, and then over the winter they'll actually put in the cable and do all the connecting and that sort of thing. Nothing real, major to report with that. I should just mention that when we say that, we mean we're going in the ground. Frontier, after a long battle, is going with us. Cable's going with us, and then We Energies is doing the gas separately. But I don't think they have started yet. But everybody's got kind of the same deadline of being done probably late. The latest would be mid-March of next year. So we're well on track to meeting that deadline.
So just so I understand, you mentioned 24/9, and I know the South Main Street's going underground and the back lot lines. So is that 24/9? Is that where the 24/9 is going, or is the 24/9 going someplace else?
That is 24/9 also.
Okay.
And actually, that will end up being a dual voltage. It'll be
Right.
24/9 down to, down to Topol's Garage down there. And then we've got a small section, Pinnacle Drive is actually on, I hope you stay with me, but Pinnacle Drive is actually on the 4160 system, and when that cable was put in, it was put in only to handle up to 5,000 volts, so we've got to maintain that at 4160 for now. So there are little pockets like that we've got to maintain, but yeah, otherwise, everything we put in from now on will be capable of handling 25,000 volts.
Is there a major line going south in addition to this south lot line that's 24/9?
Yeah, yes, the way it's set up, Mark, is that we initially put in a line that kind of came through Lakeside, through the back lot lines, and then up to the high school and farther north. So we will be connecting to that one also. So that's part of the switching we'll have to do.
Right.
But yes, the 25,000 will go all the way around the lake eventually.
The 24,000 also runs down CP Avenue to the bike trail.
Right.
Yes.
And
So-
then comes around up to St. Paul's and then comes back up and connects that one.
So it's basically, it's mostly, basically our distribution system is switching from 4160 to 24/9. There's not necessarily a major line. You got lots of lines going here, there.
The spine is 24/9.
Well, and a lot of the distribution is as well.
Yes. Yeah, the real key is that in addition to having 24/9 all the way around the lake, there will be 24/9 all the way around the city. It'll loop the entire city
Right.
also, and then we can tap into that, so, yes.
So as you're going underground, is that going to eliminate all the overhead?
Yes. Yes, there will be no power lines, no telephone lines, no charter lines overhead on South Main Street.
There will be streetlights.
There will be streetlights, but they'll be fed underground also. Yep.
And you said Sandy Beach Road too?
Eventually. That will stay overhead for a little while.
Okay.
We're actually kind of working on that, right now as to how we can eliminate that. We anticipate getting to about where the Fiber Dome building is underground, and then as time allows and we get a few more dollars, we'll start eliminating that overhead that runs down Sandy Beach too, and everything will be fed off underground.
Is that it?
That's good on that one. I think go ahead. Was
If
there
I
another
could
one?
just say something, say, Paul, I'd like to thank you personally and just for everyone here. I had a deserted power pole a few months ago on my property that was becoming dangerous. It was swinging back and forth in the wind and so forth. And I gave Paul a call, and he and his team took that pole out. And it was just a pleasure to work with you guys, and I appreciate it. Just wanted to say thank you there.
Well, thank you. I will pass that along. I appreciate that. Thanks.
Awesome work.
Okay. You want to do wastewater next? Because, John, you're pretty much here for electric and wastewater. If you do wastewater next, then you can cut loose for the city streets and water.
Okay.
All right. So you can go home early.
Or take a nap, your
Yeah.
choice.
I thought I was getting by pretty well.
Yeah. All right, well, we'll do item 8, wastewater, for John's sake, then it's up to him to stick around for the city streets and water.
Okay, good. First one on there, the discharge permits. I think we've talked about these a little bit in the past. These are permits that different companies generally have to get because they've got unique characteristics in the effluent that they're releasing to us, and it seems to be working. The two that we've got, have worked with most recently are Crystal Farms and the brewery. And we've gotten great cooperation, and we've been able to make some adjustments on our end, and I think, at least in the case of Crystal Farms, they've made some pretty significant adjustments on their end. And although I know that Bill Kiesling would not say that the plant is running really well, because it never is to him, because he's just that particular about it, it is running better. We've gotten a handle on some of these things. And so now we're continuing to work with a couple of other companies, same situation, just we don't go in and start saying, here's what you got to change, here's what you got to do. It's kind of a negotiation process. And again, it's working well, so we're seeing good things happening there.
Quick question,
Sure.
do these require monitoring manholes and all the equipment in them?
Yes, yeah, the Crystal Farms and the brewery, Tyranina, were willing to do that, and so we are getting good sampling data from that. The other one that we're working with is, which is Osprey, will require something, we're not sure yet. In fact, I think we've got a meeting with them yet this week to kind of start working on how we're going to handle that.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Wastewater South Main Street, again, and if you've got specific questions, Brandon's here because he basically designed the system for both the wastewater and water, but, you know, the plans are in, they've been approved by the DOT, and we'll be digging some really big trenches next year when it comes to installing this, but we're ready to go. Do you have any other comments in that regard? Did I hit the highlights?
Nope, the project will advertise in early January. So, yeah, not much left on our end until the bids come in, I guess.
All right, and then the last one on that is the Water Street slip lining, and Vicki has been personally affected by this one several times, but we're finally getting that wrapped up. And that was where we, in preparation for getting some other work done on Water Street in conjunction with South Main Street, we went in and took a look at some of the sewer laterals, and ones that were in bad shape, we were able to line. I don't know that did we replace any entirely?
Some.
Some
Yes.
replaced entirely?
Yeah.
So,
Ian Hughes did that this year with the.
that's
Yeah.
right. I'm sorry, that's right. In conjunction with Brewster, right. So that's pretty well wrapped up. I think there's a couple odds and ends and some restoration work to be done, but that project then will be complete also. That's what I've got for wastewater.
Any questions, comments? Okay. Now we'll circle back to city streets. You're welcome to stay, John, but it's up to you.
Steve mentioned the town meeting, I'm going to be going to that as well.
Oh, okay, all right.
Okay, the streets we'll turn over to Dwayne. He's been doing a lot of work on
All
them.
right.
Sir?
I want to start off with the maintenance work that we did through this year and send out some kudos to a lot of people that were involved. A lot of staff coordination between timing from our own staff as well as the contractors that we worked with. In particular, things like the chip seal program, which is a preventative maintenance program, involves preventive work for chips or crack filling that the street department does in preparation, as well as concrete curb replacement and patching that's done by the concrete company that we contract with and the asphalt company that we contract with. All of those things have to happen prior to the chip seal happening, which occurred in the industrial park in July, and then in other parts of the city in late summer, early September. The chip seal preventive maintenance program, again, dollar range, if you remember from our program, we're talking in the $2 to $5 range per square yard. We probably did chip seal on a number of streets, upwards of 20 to 25% of the streets this year. Those were many of those streets that were in the 5 to 8 range in our PACER ratings. Again, as you know, for next year's projects, we're probably going to be looking at a lot more mill and overlay rather than chip seal. We did hit quite a bit of the inventory of those streets that were required to have chip seal in the preventative maintenance program this year, which means next year we're probably doing more mill and overlay, similar to South Ferry that was done this summer or this fall as well. Any questions on the chip seal before I move on to patching? Patching was done in preparation of the chip seal program, but it was also done pretty heavily here in the fall for support for the lead service line replacement on the water department side, which would be the portion that is from your water service to the water main, that is the city utilities portion of the main. When, and again, we go back to that crystal ball question, when someone, a private owner, looked for the funding on the water lead service, and Paul will touch on this a little later, when those are lead and replaced, then we must replace our portion as well, which then requires an excavation in the street in most cases. And so the patching Patching totals were in the 6,500 square yard range this year for those types of work. In those patching, just to kind of break down, about 2/3 of that cost was in the street portion, meaning it was for the chip seal, and 1/3 of that overall total was for the water services. I can break down by dollars, but we're still in the process of actually finishing all the measurements. These are rough numbers at this point. We are waiting on contractors to provide us their final pay requests to review. Patching, as a matter of fact, finished yesterday. The final patches were finished late last night, and we'll talk about it in a minute. The cemetery was finished late this afternoon, in fact. So, any questions on patching? Next topic is the mill and overlays. So in a number of areas, we did mill and overlay this year. South Ferry Drive, for example, where inlets were repaired by the street department, curb and gutter was repaired in certain places. There were a couple of patches done in preparation. Then a 2-inch mill, we milled 2 inches off of the asphalt and then replaced it with 2 inches of pavement. In relationship, to give us an idea of what that costs, the $2, the chip seal is in the range of $2 to $5 a square yard. That mill and overlay process is about $10 per square yard versus the patches, which are in the $40 to $50 per square yard cost. So as you can see, the prices increase rapidly from preventive maintenance into these mill and overlay projects.
And a mill and overlay versus a chip seal, what's the effect on pacer rating? When would you apply it, and what does it bring it up to?
The mill and overlay, we would bring up to a 9 because it's not brand new.
Right.
And then the chip seal
8?
it goes to an 8. The life cycle of the chip seal is about a 7-year life cycle. The mill and overlay is looking in the 10 to 12-year range. But what we'll do is we'll follow that up with preventive maintenance, crack filling, and then chip seal in the coming years to prolong that life.
And you apply the chip seal with a pacer rate, on streets with a pacer rating of what versus the mill and overlay with a pacer rating of what?
Correct. 5 through 8s on the preventative maintenance on the chip seal, 3s and 4s for the mill and overlays.
Right.
Once they're getting into the 1 to 2 range, then
Big money.
we're passing them on to Brandon for total reconstruction.
Yeah.
Any questions on mill and overlay?
No, I already asked him.
All right. Next would be concrete work. Again, we've mentioned several of the maintenance items. There was concrete work, curb and gutter work done, as well as the water service patches. The other significant items in the concrete work is the sidewalk program. Is that another item? It is not.
Same item.
Same one, okay. So on the sidewalk program, as you've probably noticed in the last month, we've been doing sidewalk replacements in the northwest portion of the city. That's where our counterclockwise route is proceeding, which each year's budget in the sidewalk program. This year, the sidewalk program, because we were doing a number of other projects and we were very busy in our maintenance of streets, the entire budget was not completely finished before we asked the contractor, because of weather, to stop. And so there will potentially be a discussion with Steve and the council about, I believe we're in the $57,000 range expended, which will leave about $57,000 or 50% of the dollars still available. The contractor has written to us and agreed to hold their prices into 2018. So our proposal will be to talk with the council about holding those dollars in order to continue that project in 2018. The same decision was made with the County Trunk Highway V sidewalk program or project. Because of the time of year, and a number of things that timing-wise didn't seem to work this year. The contractor has agreed to, again, hold their price on those, to look to do that sidewalk in 2018, early.
What section of sidewalk was that?
This was a TID portion project from South Main Street, or North Main Street, pardon me, to
West.
the west,
Yep.
to the market
Yep, okay.
on the south side of County Trunk Highway B. So it would be across, between Culvers and Main Street, and then across the cemetery and into the property, the vacant property that's to the west of the cemetery. So at this point, we're proposing to have that work be done in 2018, when the weather is a little better for that work. Any questions on concrete? Yep, here.
I just want to make one comment, if I may, or maybe two, see how it works out. We took a lot of heat for a couple of situations, and I think we talked about this a little bit. One was where we chip sealed the street, and then shortly after that, we went in and dug it up, and that was for the lead service line replacement. And the other one is just, how late, or I think it had to do with Halloween and the fact that we had some sidewalks dug up for Halloween. And we tried very hard to coordinate all this, but when we're dealing with different contractors and that sort of thing, it gets very difficult. And I can tell you, and I want to, this is the second comment, that Dwayne really bird dogs these projects. I mean, he's with the contractors constantly, and I know it's a source of frustration to him when things don't, quite go according to plan. So we're trying to come up with a way that we can get the contractors in earlier so that we're not dealing with this stuff late in the year. We've talked to the folks, the contractors that are doing the lead service line replacement work, and are trying to get more information from them about when they're going to be in different neighborhoods and that sort of thing, so that we can avoid this. It's not going to be 100%. There's always going to be these coordination issues, but I know Dwayne spent a lot of time trying to work all this out, and it's frustrating to people. We understand that, and I guess the message is we're doing our best not to have these types of things happen.
Thanks, Paul. One comment about the chip seal being done in the patches. Again, chip seal is a preventative maintenance item. While I respect the fact that dollars are dollars, a chip seal program, again, we're in the $1.60 a square yard price. So if we're talking about a patch that's 15 by 15 or say 25 square yards, we're talking about $25 versus the patch, which is in the $50 a square yard price. So it's substantially more to replace with the patch. So if we would have completely stopped doing the maintenance on the chip seal, we would have had another year of deterioration to the streets over the entire course of all the streets that we would stop that work for about $25 a patch, or in the areas of the patch. So that decision to move forward is still difficult, but there is some dollar associated with it. And again, it's a crystal ball thing. Knowing where these contractors are going to replace the lead services can change from day to day. And so we moved forward with our preventive maintenance program that we had already bid, and just so happened that in some of those cases there were some trenches that were excavated. Anything else on preventive maintenance or the maintenance projects?
Nope.
Brewster.
Yeah, I can talk about it if you like.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, Brewster Drive is done. We're into, I guess, the warranty phase. The final payment has been made on it. It was completed a smidge later than anticipated, but overall, I think myself and city staff were pretty happy with how it went. The grass all came in pretty nice this fall, I thought, and I don't know, maybe Mark, you have some thoughts on it, but yeah, that's where Brewster Drive is, and don't really have anything left on our end. We had some retaining walls that went in kind of late in the project, is what kind of delayed it a little bit to get those completed. But overall, I thought it went fairly smooth this year.
So what's the city policy on retaining walls versus sloping it? Is it homeowner's choice, or and who pays? You know, how does that work all?
Well, I mean, generally how we've gone with it is if the slope is going to be worse than it was before and above, generally we consider a 4-to-1 or a 25% slope is mowable. So if somebody already has, say, a 3-to-1 or steeper than that, and you're going to put back a 3-to-1, you know, we're not going to put in a retaining wall because they're quite expensive.
Right.
But if they have a 5-to-1, flatter than a 4-to-1, and you're trying to put in a 3-to, or you would need to put in a 3-to-1 without a retaining wall, then we would often put in a retaining wall.
In that case, you put in a retaining wall automatically, or you talk to the homeowner?
I would say generally err on the side of a retaining wall.
Yeah, I don't know, Mark, that we have a specific strict policy on it. It's
Yeah.
kind of case-by-case
Yeah.
basis.
Yeah.
On Brewster, I think we had a combination, where in some cases we talked to the homeowner and asked them what they would want. And in other cases, we kind of had the sense that that slope was just too much, that down the road there were going to be problems, you know, and then, so I don't know if there could be an absolute policy that says under these conditions we'll do it, but it becomes it's a tough decision because there is some good dollars involved in it, and there's aesthetics.
Yeah.
You know, there's a number of issues to consider with it, so.
And oftentimes it's what's behind the, you know, if you were to grade an area to a reasonable slope, you know, sometimes people have nice flower gardens and fences, or there's a sizable tree that would need to come out or something like that, that while a mowable, maintainable slope would be possible, it would require removing things that people would probably not want to on private property.
A long time ago, we used to allow people who've had disagreements with staff policy over such items to come here for a verdict. But it hasn't been done in years.
Certainly a possibility. I think in some cases it happens a little quick too, where, you know, you don't necessarily have a month to make the decision, but,
Right.
you know, I jotted it down as probably another discussion, if at least have some guidelines as to how we approach the situation.
Right.
That's all I had on Brewster. Any other question?
Cemetery?
No, we can, okay, go ahead.
I'm just moving down the line to 7C, the cemetery overlay. Again, that work was finished in the last couple days. Actually, it was finished today, but it was done in the last couple days. This is for the parks budget, actually, but it's on this agenda. This is to finish up the work that was done last year. That was split into two different budgets. And as of, I believe, 2 o'clock this afternoon, the work that was proposed to be done is complete. There are a number of streets or another roads inside of the cemetery that the Parks Board is looking to hold off on any maintenance on those streets at this time. So if someone drives through and says there's a couple streets that were not completed, that is by design at this point. Any questions there? Although it's really a Parks Department project. Elm Street. You want that one?
Sure. Elm Street was built last year. We had a punch list of small items hanging out there through this year, which is now complete. The project is not entirely done in terms of an administrative perspective, and like there's payments still hanging out there, but in terms of the little pieces that were left to be done, it's complete. The last little piece was actually completed today. There was a small piece of asphalt missing near a curb that was cracked and replaced for quite a while now. And after a multitude of asking and conversations, it finally got filled in today, so that was very nice to see.
Is that the street behind Culver's?
Yes.
Yes, correct, yeah.
Oh, it looked done to me.
Yeah, it was only a few inches wide.
Okay.
They cut the asphalt to replace the curb and
All right.
put the curb back, but then left a little sliver of asphalt missing. So that was really the last piece hanging out there.
And really, the only other piece is then, again, the contract paperwork, the
Yeah.
final pay request,
Yeah.
the maintenance period, really the financials in that punch list were the remaining items there.
Yeah.
Right.
Griffith Street, that was the other component of the East Lake Park Place contract. That is also complete. We, for a while, had a few small items hanging out there on the punch list to be done, but those have been taken care of. We may have some warranty sidewalk left to be completed that Dwayne had brought to my attention, that there may be some cracked sidewalk out there that needs to be replaced still, but the contract, all city contracts have a year warranty from the date of substantial completion, so that would still be in effect. So we'll have to take a look at those and get those replaced if they need to be.
Southside Bike Trail, I believe the electric department started putting in silt fence today with their trenching machine. So that is the south side. That's the trail from the school on South
St. Paul.
St. Paul School to the Glacial Dromelin Trail to the spur area, through what is actually school district property, would be just due north of St. Paul School. The intention there is the silt fence is going in before the frost, with the intention that the street department, after they're completed topsoiling all of the sidewalk areas and finish picking up all of the leaves in the city, the hope is to strip the topsoil yet before frost hits and then work on the construction of that trail throughout the winter as weather allows.
Okay, that explains the path of destruction I saw. So where does it go then from to the north of the bike trail then? Where does it hook up in the city?
It connects, I don't know if I have any plans, but it
Well, it's just-
connects from the school parking, St. Paul's school parking lot. It parallels what would be, let's see, an overview here. What will be Unsaven Lane. There's a city right away just north of the St. Paul's
Yeah.
parking lot.
It does?
Yeah, there's a piece going north of the bike trail, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
From St. Paul's to the Glacial Drumlin Trail.
It'll cross that.
Yeah, it'll
Yeah.
cross that. So you got the piece coming in from the school to the bike trail,
Right.
then it's going to continue on to the north, so I'm just curious to know where it's going to end up in the city.
Not sure how to work this thing, but
No, I think
you're the
it's
same.
way down there. Kind of an L-shaped path from St. Paul's here to the trail.
If you've been on the bike trail that comes off of CP Avenue, that spur
Yeah,
is right where Brandon is.
all right.
But it doesn't go north of the bike trail.
So
I thought
it's
it
north of
goes-
St. Paul, south of the Glacial Drumlin Trail.
Oh, so it ends at, so the route is the kids get on the bike trail, then they go to the spur, the existing spur.
Or to South Main Street.
Yeah, or to South Main Street.
Right.
Rather than south of the Drumlin Trail driving on, or riding, or walking
On the highway.
on the highway.
Right.
Yeah.
And this project is a grant-funded project, and I believe it runs through June of next year. So the street department will be, and other departments are working together to install this and have it completed by the middle of next year.
I would add, I guess, that the effort from the city, from the street department is part of it's a 50/50 grant match, and the city can match with in-kind funding, so you're allowed to assign a certain hourly rate to labor and equipment to match the grant funding for materials for the path.
I want to throw in a quick comment here because something unique is happening, if you will. And that, Dwayne mentioned that Chris and the electric crew are putting in a silt fence. Typically, they wouldn't do that. We have the equipment and the manpower, and the overall point I want to make is, I mean, we've got a rather extensive list of special projects we're doing here that we're talking about tonight, but there's still all the day-to-day stuff that goes on. And so the interdepartmental cooperation has been fantastic, where we can draw from one department to another. You know, it's something that seems like it should happen pretty easily, but, you know, we're always trying to schedule time in all the departments to get people in the right places. And so I got to be careful here, but, you know, we've got a lot going on, is the bottom line. And people are stretched pretty thin. And so being able to work back and forth is an immense help. But you'll notice that we didn't get all of the painting, the street striping, street painting that's done this year. We just don't have enough people to do it. And so we're going to be talking about this a little more in the future, about how we do some of these things. Do we contract them out? Do we need more people, et cetera, et cetera? There's no, I'm not offering an answer or solution. I'm just bringing the issue to your attention right now, because it's only going to get worse. We've got a lot we're trying to do, and we're trying to stay within all the budget constraints and that sort of thing. So I'm just setting up a future discussion is what I'm doing. I appreciate you letting me do that. The next item is the Yardway Center. And I think you're aware that we are working on some other option to that. It's really getting out of hand. People are dropping off stuff there that we never imagined they would drop off. I'm not going to tell you the details, but we're looking at a way to catch those folks. So if you're out there, be ready for us, because we just can't allow this to happen. And it's not just a matter of inconvenience. Somebody dropped off basically railroad timbers and what appeared to be a small house. And, yeah, it's weird. Okay, yard waste, must be an old house, I'll put it there. Wizard of Oz type thing. Anyway, there's a cost to this. And it's, what happened is that some of the spikes from this punctured our front end loader. And those tires are gonna cost about $5,000 to replace. So there's literally a cost to people abusing this thing. So, like I say, we're going to be looking for ways to keep an eye on who's doing this stuff, and in the meantime, that's kind of a short term, in the meantime, we're looking for other options where we can keep a little more control over what happens to this. So, I guess that's what I've got for the Yardway Center. Right, stay tuned for that discussion, too. All right, I'll keep moving.
All right.
Can you help me hand these out? I'm sorry.
So we did wastewater, so now we're up to water.
Yeah, and I apologize. Misty is handing out just a really quick report. You want to run one over to Dan? What I'm handing you is just a quick update. As you see, it's well, when you get it in your hands, I apologize. It's a report as of Monday on how the lead service line replacement program is going. Excuse me, you see we've already replaced, or I should say contractors have replaced 44 services. This is interesting to note because in our PSC reports, we've been constantly telling the PSC that we only have 37, so somehow 7 more grew, apparently. And we've got 27 more scheduled, or the contractors have got 27 more scheduled to finish this year. What we also did is put together a list or started a list of people that live on either South Main or Mulberry and asked them, don't do yours now because we're going to be digging up your street soon. And that also includes people that have gotten the information, know they've got lead water lines, but they're not sure if they want to spend the dollars to do it. So we've got what's called an earmarked list, and there are 48 residents on that. And so when you add all those up, we're going to be somewhere in the 119, 120 services that we're going to be able to replace. And you'll see, based on the amount of money that we're reimbursing people right now, which is that $2,550.09, that's kind of the average reimbursement cost. We've committed to about $299,000 of the $300,000 that we were allotted. So we have told the contractors that as of November 1st, actually, we cannot promise residents that they will get reimbursed. So we anticipate the number of services that get replaced will drop dramatically. But the program is doing what it was intended to do. We met with the DNR actually just today and went over some of this, and of course they're pleased with the fact that we're replacing these lead laterals. The issue we're going to come up against, and I hope it's a good issue, is right now we have to take samples from 40 homes twice a year to test for lead. When we start replacing those places, we lose our locations for samples. And the intention is that the number of replacements and the number of samples eventually merge, and we don't have enough places to take samples. We get out of this consent order thing where we've got to do these 220,000 things that we have to do for the DNR. And we can assure the residents of Lake Mills that we've got a pretty good handle on lead service lines. Then, however, though, that begs the question, what do we do after the LSL money is gone? And what we get into then is really managing the orthophosphates that we put into the system. That's a chemical that's designed to coat the water pipes and keep the lead from leaching into the water. And we begin, or we continue, I should say, an extensive education program on what people can do. You know, we're talking about filters, running water. You know, in most homes, the amount of water that's run is not a big deal. The water doesn't sit in the pipes long enough to leach. But we know there's a specific problem with homes where there are elderly people, and they just plain don't use a lot of water. And so there's not a lot of water running through the system. The water sits in the pipes, and the lead tests become higher. And so there's some education there about just using a certain amount of water, or being aware of when you take that first draw of water to run some water before you do that. So there's some education stuff that can be done. The other issue that we're going to run into, and here's where the news gets really tough, is even though we're able to give this grant money to folks to replace their water lines, that doesn't cover our costs. We're averaging probably somewhere between $2,500 and $4,000 a piece to replace our portion of the water line. And that's it's not a requirement, it's a strong recommendation from the DNR that we not replace a portion of the line, that we replace the whole thing. So we are, no doubt, by the time this is all done, going to have a considerable investment from the water department in replacing lead service lines. So we are working on another rate case right now, and this will be included in it. I mean, our guesstimate is that we could spend up to $500,000 on this project, and that's a big portion of our annual revenue already. So we're looking at some significant costs, some potential water rate increases. Part of our discussion with the DNR today, or a very, very small portion of it, was to see if there's some loan funds available so we can get some low-cost money to do some of this. But we're definitely, within the next few months, going to be talking to you all about rate increases and how we're going to handle this. Nice program, it's effective, but it's very, very expensive.
The latest total just on the curb and gutter and asphalt replacement, not counting the piping that was replaced, is in the $120,000 range just for the pavement and the concrete restoration above. So add that to the dollar amount for the service replacement itself, or the excavation.
So does the city know how many lead laterals are still out there?
Good segue.
I think Dwayne's got that, yeah.
So that is actually item 9D.
Oh, okay.
Water line inspection. So I spoke with Brian Kane, who is our city's observer. He is making appointments with residents and reviewing the material of the service from the meter to the foundation of the home. So he'll be sending out letters to different parts of the city. He's continuing to do that. He is also focusing some prioritization. He is focusing on next year's mill and overlay areas to try and incorporate and know where those locations are in our next year's maintenance program. So to kind of follow up what we talked about before, to try and get a little better handle on that crystal ball before we do our mill and overlay next summer. Some numbers that Brian gave me earlier this week, he's starting with a spreadsheet that came out of the utility system, and there are about 3,800 customers. He has completed about 530 of those. Of those 530, 168 have been lead at a rate of about 32%. Again, he is focusing in some of the oldest portions of the community. He has already looked at South Main and Mulberry for the substantially, I say he's substantially complete because some property owners have not yet agreed to have him review there. So there are some occasionally that he's not getting to. But in general, that 32% probably isn't accurate to say that it's 32% throughout the community. That just means those are the areas that he's focusing on, which are probably in the older portions of the city. That being said, 330 or about 62% were copper, and other plastic and galvanized were and actually some unknowns, areas where the piping is so close to the foundation at the meter socket that there actually isn't exposed pipe to review. And in those cases, there's a small number of those where it wasn't able to be determined at the building site. To give you an idea of, and maybe even an idea of how many are remaining, because in that 3,800, we already know that areas like Brookstone, Arbor Creek, some of the other newer subdivisions, we know that they're copper. So there's probably about 1,700 remaining that we don't have information on. If we roughly subtract off what he's already been to and areas that we suspect are probably copper, or we know that they're copper. We are continuing to do a map, or Brian is continuing to do a map, and so we're looking for, we will be this winter looking closer at age of water main and a pattern that is emerging in his mapping of where they're located, where the copper is located and where the lead is located, to try and help determine other places to look and focus on. Paul, anything else?
So for the DNR sampling, you have to do 40 homes or something? Is that the number I heard?
That's correct. We have to do 40 homes twice a year.
And do they have to be homes with lead laterals if there are known homes with lead laterals?
Yes, in fact, they have to be approved by the DNR. So the DNR's got to be sure that it's got a lead lateral, and yeah. It's kind of you're set up to fail situation.
Yeah, I know. So for the foreseeable future, we're going to be continuing. There's no lack of homes with lead laterals for the next few years, it seems.
Well, I will note that the 168 does include the 100, is including the 119.
Yeah.
So as you subtract the two, you're getting very close to that 40 number again.
But there's a
larger area, yes.
yeah.
Yeah, there will come a point.
Yeah, sometime in the future.
Yeah. You know, one of the other parts of the consent order is that we have to replace 7% of the known lead laterals. Now, that's based on the 37, so that was good, we came up with that number initially, but that's only 3 a year. So, you know, we've already done 44, so we're 11 years in the future.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding, but I think there will come a point when the DNR says, okay, there's not much more you can do other than educate, because people aren't going to pay. I think it's averaging just under, well, probably just over $3,000 a pop to replace these. People aren't going to pay that necessarily unless they get some kind of reimbursement. And so education is going to become the thing, and I'm hopeful that, you know, within the next couple, 3 years, we can talk with the DNR and say this, you know, we've probably reached our point of diminishing returns on this, and it's time to do something different.
Next topic.
Moving right along?
Yep.
So a little information on water loss, or the status of the water loss. First, I want to commend the water department has been doing a substantial amount of work in repairing hydrants, repairing leaks, known leaks in the past couple of years. And we are seeing a significant decrease in the amount of water lost. In fact, this past month was probably one of the best months in quite some time. The loss has dropped from the 35% range down to about 24% in this last month. That's years since we've seen numbers like that. To give an idea, that it's a little deceiving though when we come to the PSC report. In 2016, there was about 81 million gallons lost, or about 35% of the pumped water was lost in unknown areas. In 2017, from November to November, the percentage is actually exactly the same, is 35% loss. So when we report to the PSC, it will show basically that there hasn't been an improvement. However, the 12-month period has changed from 81 million lost to 73 million lost. So there has been actually 8 million gallons found or repaired. So there is a move in the positive direction, while it may not be seen in the percentages. Some of the reasons for that is actually that the volume being pumped or the volume being sold is actually going down considerably. For one example of that is Hamlin is no longer a large water user. And so as their use went down, that is a one-for-one. There's not loss in their system. So you're actually losing percentages. And so that's why we're seeing, even though we're seeing a better number on the amount lost, it's not helping us on the percentage. However, there is some positive news. Again, October of this year, or last month's totals, if you project out that loss for that 1 month, if we continue to maintain that, the loss could drop to 43 million, which is basically half of what we were in 2016. So there is improvement, and Paul, I'll let you kind of talk a little bit about if there's anything else you want to add on that.
Really quickly, you know, there's a number of fronts we're working on. We're changing out meters. I think we're well over 200 on our meter change-outs, fixing hydrants, finding leaks, which we haven't had too many of, so I'm sorry I mentioned that, but we're making some headway. I think we're getting things cleared up much better in our billing system, so we've got a better number of what we're actually billing for. We had some concerns about that for a while, that number wasn't quite matching up to what it should, but I think we've worked out that. So we're staying at it, and I think that's the report we had last time, is that we're seeing improvement, we're seeing enough improvement to keep going.
And we'll probably look, over the winter months, we'll have a little bit of time to look at more of the detail into if we're seeing any patterns on the replaced meters versus how they were pumping, how they were billing in the past, for example, and a new meter being placed in. Is there a change in the amount of water usage? at particular businesses or residents. And that's part of the meter change out as well. So we'll continue to observe this and look for other ways to reduce that percentage lost.
That's it?
think
That's what we
that's
got?
Any other questions or comments on water? All right, and agenda item 10, recommendations for future agendas. I don't have any. You have an idea what, something coming from staff?
Yeah, I do have one. Actually, I've got, if I may ask a question, was this effective for you? Is this a good thing to do? You know, when we
Yeah.
got into it, it's very time-consuming for us, but it was also very good because we were able to get a really good handle on, you know, everything that's going on, and, you know, it's stuff we talk about and deal with all day, every day, but putting it in this form actually helped us also do some coordination. So perhaps a once-a-year run at this, and I see Vicki nodding, in it. Yeah. So if this was an effective format, we'll continue to do this. Good. Then the recommendation for future agendas. We got notice from the DNR on October 27th that the level of radium at well 4 had exceeded slightly what the thresholds are. The threshold is 5 picocuries per liter. We're at 5.5. And so that prompts the DNR to tell us that we've got to let folks know that, and then also come up with a plan to keep that below 5. So I probably not for next month, but maybe in January, February, we'll want to talk about the plan that we're coming up with for this situation.
Does that mean that the well's going to dry? No.
No, radium is a natural occurring element, and it just happens in this one particular well, and it's high. And what they do is they take a running yearly total, or average. What we have to do is we have to test the water every quarter. And then the average from those 4 tests is what they use to determine if we've exceeded. And 2 out of the last 4 tests, we were slightly above. 2 we were below, but because of the average, it tripped into their notification system. The water's not unsafe. Absolutely, the DNR is saying that's not what we have to tell people, but that this has reached a point where we should do something about it before it does get higher. Excuse me, and it just so happens that well 4 is deep enough that the final little bit of it actually is in granite. And granite is one of the rocks, if you will, that's notorious for releasing radium. So it may be something as simple as shortening up the well, covering the granite, and that will take care of our tests. So the point is that it's something we've got to look at closely, we've got to respond to. That's kind of the bad news. The good news is we're in a very good position to get an inexpensive way to go after this. But wanted you to be aware of it now, and then we'll be talking more about what our plans are going forward. That's something we have to submit to the DNR eventually. So, and it's not, this seems to be the issue du jour, because there's a number of other cities that are in the same situation where their threshold or their tests have exceeded the threshold, and they've got bigger issues to take care of than we do. So, future agenda item.
All right. Okay. I will adjourn the meeting.